Hello and welcome to the Vlogging Pod. Tonight we are joined by novelist, screenwriter Roberta M. Roy. Welcome to the room, Roberta. How are you this evening?
Well, I'm fine.
Awesome, awesome. Um, so I want to start right off having a little bit of your background. I find it very interesting. You've written a few, I think you've written one and it went into a very big book. Am I correct in that thinking?
I've actually written 5 or 6 books,
Okay.
but, the 3 that, you're probably most interested in are it's a trilogy. It starts with Jolt, a rural noir, and then it's Too Close, and then, Home Again 2020 is the 3rd in the series.
Okay. Um, and then you've written the books and you decided to do what in the course of your writing?
Well, I've been working on this project for 20 years, and it started after 9/11 when I became concerned because I live about 35 miles from a nuclear, and I was concerned about a meltdown. And I learned about uh, the possibility that I could become involved in some courses with the military that would teach me how to respond in case of mass events, and one of which was a nuclear meltdown. So I took 100 hours with the military, and the week-long course on how do you respond to a nuclear meltdown, what I thought was so informative and calming, because I live 35 miles from the power plant, at which point you have the option of either hunkering down for 72 hours or running. And I thought, people need to know this. And there are 90 nuclear power plants in the United States, and about 8 of them have had meltdowns.
Wow.
Yeah. So I wrote Jolt first, which is about the meltdown, and then there are these characters in there, and they evolve, and it turns out there's a family in there called the Matters family, and it's a mother, a father, and 2 boys, and the mother is sprayed by radioactive matter from a dirty bomb, and the father is he suffers brain injury from the impact of the explosion from a dirty bomb, and the 2 boys, they take to the road, and then the communication system is down because the grid is down, and they can't contact their parents. So they wind up being separated for a goodly time. The father, because he has amnesia, the mother is at home, the boys are on the road. And eventually, after, a couple of years go by, they're reunited. So I think Home Again 2020 was what you featured in the image related to this conversation.
Yes, I did that simply because I believe Jolt, the survival series, was based on what your pilot was. Am I correct on that thinking?
Yes, yes. And so so Home Again 2020 has become a drama. I've written scripts. I've turned all 3 books into a series of scripts, 4 dramas, and also a television series of hour-long episodes. And that's where I am now. I'm marketing them, hoping someone will produce them. I'm entering contests, and I've won a few and whatever. But anyhow, that's where I am.
That's awesome. So let's start talking about the flexibility. I don't know exactly on your career? I know you have a speech therapy. So tell me about your working scenario. Is it from home? Do you have an office that you go to? Tell us
Oh,
about the flexibility that incurs with that.
okay. Well, when I started the series, I was a a full-time speech language pathologist. Um, and the first book, I actually had taken a year off. I forget exactly why. But anyhow, during that year, I think I'd broken my ankle. I can't remember. And during that year, I wrote Jolt,
Oh,
Jolt,
wow.
Jolt series. And then thereafter, as a full time speech language pathologist, in my spare time, I wrote the next two. No, I wrote the next two, and when COVID happened, I I wrote just one. When COVID happened, I stopped being a speech language pathologist. I couldn't work in a small office with children from all over the county. I was concerned about my grandsons, me transmitting COVID to them and whatever. So I stayed at home, and at that time I wrote Home Again 2020, and I rewrote the first two so that they were backdated, so that it became a sequence that was in chronological order, because I had written the first two as if they were in the future. And so I had to backdate them so that Home Again 2020 had to come later than them. And then thereafter, I finished those, and then I said, I don't get enough readers. Maybe if I produce them as plays. So I wrote them as scripts, and I now have the four dramas and the 10-hour scripts, one of which is the pilot for the Jolt Survival teleseries, and nine others that follow.
Right. Well, you bring up a very curiosity thing for me. So you've written the books, and I am a writer. I don't know if you know that. I've written a couple books myself, 12,
Okay.
but um so I know the main format for writing a book, at least my format, which I'm sure everyone's a little bit different on their own writing technique. But I have no familiarity with screenwriting. Tell me the difference between the screenwriting
Okay. Get
and
this. Uh, the first book I outlined. I outlined from the beginning to the end, and then I wrote it. The second one, I sort of plucked in some ideas and wrote it. And the third one, I wrote without an outline and without a real I had a direction I was going in. Then, when I got to the scripts, I had to take the novels and turn them into dialogue primarily and images. And what I had to reduce all the descriptive language in a novel that goes out. It's either an image or somebody says, "Oh, I saw him," or what, or "Here it is," or whatever. So writing the scripts, the biggest challenge for me was formatting them, and so I have a program that does the formatting for me, but still it was more subtle than I was able to achieve. So after I wrote the scripts, I had the script gurus help me with the formatting, and they feel that the content is, it's fine, it's excellent, but the formatting needed to be improved a little. So yeah, so the
Okay, so you talk about you said you just mentioned, and I'm very curious about this. This is my curiosity working overboard. So you mentioned you have a program that helps you format. Walk me through that. What exactly is the program, and what kind of setup does it do in this kind of situation?
okay. It's I think it's called Final Draft. Oh my goodness, I hope it's called Final Draft. Um, it what it does is you there's a border across the top, and you click on it for things that you want. So suppose you want to have the speaker, the character's name centered in the middle. So you pick character and you type, and it types out it automatically in uppercase letters and centers it. Then you do dialogue. You click dialogue, and it moves it over a little to the left, but not way over to the left. And then you type the dialogue, and then you want action. Action, you pick action, and then it automatically brings the cursor over to the far left, and you type action. So there are like a dozen different selections that you can make that determine the formatting. For instance, a scene title, a new act, an act, the ending of an act, whatever. These all have their own specific way of being formatted. But there are subtleties that go beyond that, which I was not informed about. And it was those that I needed someone to help me with.
Isn't that how it usually works? Trust me, when I wrote my first book, there were things I didn't know until you get your feet wet and then someone else points these things. I think this is how we grow as writers.
Oh,
And I
sure.
and I think it's beneficial for you to dive right in. How else are you going to learn and grow if we don't make a few mistakes along the way?
Right.
But that's
I
it.
simply wrote. I thought it was marvelous. Look at that. I wrote a play. And then, you get, you send it out to have it evaluated and, critiqued and whatever. And the formatting was needed much to be done.
That's very interesting. So tell me about that. Um who did you embrace as far as helping you about what
Oh,
still needed to be done?
scriptgurus.com. And the particular one that I worked with, and he still has something that he's working on for me. He goes by AJ, the letter A, the letter J, and I don't know what his real name is, um, but he's been wonderful. Yeah, scriptgurus.com. Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting. So as we look at Jolt Survival for the television series pilot,
Yeah.
and this is your first screenwriting venture, yes?
All right. This one was written before I got involved with the script gurus, but after I had written 8 episodes of the series. And then, oh, I need a pilot. So what I did was I simply lifted scenes from the various episodes and put them in there. Now, that's not the way in which pilots are typically written, because people write a pilot in order to sell an idea and then they write the series later. Well, since mine is based on novels that were already written, I I just had to go in and write it as a play. And I'll address one other thing about writing it as a play, which is turning everything into dialogue. It, it, Sometimes you have to create a new character to do the talking, because it's not, what's happening, what's being seen isn't central to the action, but it needs to be there. Sometimes you can create characters as you go. But
I fully understand what you're saying. I have a tendency to do that in my own writing, third person removed. So I find it very interesting to write that way, and even giving your characters still their line of verse, but coming from another format. Are you following me on that one?
yeah, right, yeah. You just
That
have
is interesting. Yes.
yeah. And that was a big challenge. And the other thing is, with a script, I am given to long, convoluted sentences. It's the bane of my life. I can only write very simply.
I
for
fully understand that
script
too.
writing.
Right. Since we
The
mentioned,
dialogue. Yeah,
since we
go ahead.
mentioned, since we mentioned Jolt, your series, tell us a bit about the series itself. I know you just talked about how you went to your military base and you, for the power plant. Tell me a little bit about the series itself.
Okay. Well, there are really two major lines of stories in it because with a meltdown, you have the effects of people really up close, which I did not deal with. I did not deal, there's no violence or whatever in this whole series except for Mary getting radioactive material on her arm and getting radiation sickness, and Lou being thrown backward by the burst of a dirty bomb, so that he gets profound brain injury, because that. What I wanted to tell were two things. One was about how you survive in the event of a nuclear meltdown. The other, well, more than two things. The other was to tell how a community has to respond when it's overrun by mass migrants. And because of the meltdown, the people flee to this small village a couple hundred miles away. I mean, they flee different lengths, but I focused on this small village and how the people there have to figure out how to feed, clothe, house, provide medical care for the forced immigrants. And then I have the Matters family who live closer, and you follow them more as individuals. And because I'm a speech language pathologist, I include, Lou with his profound traumatic brain injury, his loss of memory, his loss of vision on the left side of his eyes, his flat affect, and his progression as he improves, because eventually he does become pretty much his old self, except he never loses the left side blindness, so he can never drive. So he has to give up what he was doing. He was working at the nuclear power plant, and he becomes a designer, a website designer. He doesn't have to drive. He works from home. He works online. But the other thing about that, why I wanted to include him, was there are many of the military returning from the Middle East who suffered right side brain injury, and it's an invisible thing. You don't see it, and it was a way of making it available to everybody to kind of look at. And then the boys, when they're surviving on the road, they eventually wind up in the small village. So, and it's from there that they uh, link with home. So, although they're two separate stories, the village story has to do with Thaw, who's an artist. His father doesn't really approve of his being an artist. He doesn't make enough money. His lover doesn't approve of his being an artist. Really, he doesn't make enough money. He's not reliable. And he's striving to be an artist, and he really is an excellent artist. And then this meltdown that interrupts everything, and it changes the dynamics. He does go on to become a successful artist, but meantime, Natalie, his lover, accepts him as he is because he's wonderful in saving the village, and his father accepts him too, and whatever. So anyhow, it's the story of both surviving the meltdown and surviving one's own difficulties as a result of the meltdown and responding as a community to a mass of forced immigrants or forced migrants.
That is a lot. That's a lot. I can see why they are hour-long episodes and there are 10 in total. Am I correct?
Yes, actually, uh, the last the last one goes beyond the last book. It was written strictly as a script, and
Okay.
so after Home Again 2020, I have them, living in the community. And then we had, because Home Again 2020 is an historical novel. So I take things from what really happened in 2020 and embed that in the novel. But then in the next episode, we have, refugee from Afghanistan coming into the school, and the boys adjusting with them and them adjusting and figuring it out. And the Afghanis speak English because their father was an interpreter, but there are also Mexicans who are there, or someone from, I think, Colombia speaks no English whatsoever. And so it's adjusting again to changes in the society, uh,
Right.
that were historically
Right.
familiar.
Well, that's incredible. Actually, there seems to be a lot in this story. We've only got 6 more seconds on the clock. I want to ask you one final question before it bings on me here. There it goes. I know it. But let me ask you one final question before I let you
Yeah,
go. Um, Tell me, since you've written books and now you're going into the screenwriting, uh,
right.
tell me the most tasking part of it from switching from one to the other. What did you find the most difficult from switching from basic writer, author, if you will, and into screenwriter?
Um, I think it's finally marketing them and getting people to know about them, hoping to find a producer. And so that the writing, it was just, I mean, it was all, and it took some energy and some thinking and whatever. And, formatting was a challenge, and writing shorter sentences was a challenge. And, I mean, there was no, the challenges never got greater. They were just always there. There were always something
I
new to learn.
I understand that. the, the pub not it's publishing itself is its own difficulty, but trying to put it out into social media and make people aware of your work, that seems to be the biggest issue for all of us as far as writing, movies. Um, but once you are able to get that niche, and I'm sure that you'll get there very soon, I am sure that this is going to do so well on the screen. I'm totally excited to even get to the book and dive into it. So I thank you so much for being on my program this evening, Roberta.
Well, Ari, thank you so much. I've enjoyed it. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to talk. I think I talked too much.
No, no, you talk just enough. I love people that are ready to dive right in and tell about their story. And yours seems very in depth. You did a lot of research, especially going onto the military base and taking that week course. That's awesome. I'm serious. So thank you so much for being on the show. And I'm telling you, if you get this on the air, would you please come back so we can talk about your experiences of it getting it on TV?
Okay. Well, I now have 12 actors and actresses interested in playing in it. If you look on International Screenwriters Association website, there are, and some of them are rather well known.
That's fantastic. I'm so excited for you. Oh my gosh. Now you definitely have to come back. As soon as you start to get it all more
Right.
planned, please. We can
Yes.
even bring your cast of characters and bring them on and talk about the experience of just starting out. I would love that.
Oh, thank you so much, Ari. Well, when I've made some progress, I'll get back to you.
All right. You promise now. I'll keep your word on that.
Right. And you've been excellent. You've got me talking more than I have since COVID hit.
I can relate on that. Well, thank you so much, Roberta, for coming, and please do come back. I will keep on track with you because you are on stage
Okay.
32, and I am on there too. Thank you so
Yes.
much to our listeners for being on with us tonight, and we are gonna follow Roberta, and I will keep you guys in tabs on what's going on this film because 'cause I'm excited for you, Roberta. I really think this could be something. Thank you
Well,
again
thank
so much,
you.
everyone.